Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chain.
Hey, I'm Adam Chain.
And I'm Shoshana Chain, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 215, Eating Disorders in Athletics with Chris Hague.
In today's episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talk to Chris Hague about eating disorders in athletics, and we focus on high school and college athletes. Often, eating disorders are regarded as a feminine disorder found in cheerleaders, dancers, and gymnasts, but eating disorders within the male athletic population is real, and the stigma needs to be let go so these boys and men can stop slipping through the cracks. This is an important show for every athlete, student, parent, teacher, and coach out there to listen to. Please share this episode so those in need can get the help they deserve.
Chris Hague is a passionate endurance athlete and coach. Along with his wife, he founded Braveheart Canada, a coaching program dedicated to helping athletes achieve their athletic, health, and life goals through an integrative approach that blends nutrition, psychology, and physiology. Currently, Chris is completing his Master's of Science in Sports Psychology at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario.
We're so grateful that more and more listeners are communicating with us on our Plant Trainers page and via email. It means so much to us that you're sharing your journey. More and more, we find that listeners are new to plant-based and they're scared about going back to their old ways. They're not always increasing their energy or losing weight, or they've hit some plateaus and they're completely confused about what or how much to eat. All these listeners want to have better quality of life. They want to get exercising. They want to love what they see in the mirror, and they want to safeguard themselves as much as possible from chronic illness or premature death down the road.
It's really surprising when people tell us they've been listening for months and months, and they always hear us say, email us at info@planttrainers.com to find out how we can help you fast track and hit your goals, but they wait so long and wonder why they didn't reach out sooner. So we're encouraging you to stop waiting. Email us today and let's talk about your journey, your challenges and goals, and see how we can help you. You can be like Carmen, who lost over 55 pounds since October, or Roxanne, who has a better understanding of how to nourish her body and has no more pain or swelling, or Sharon, whose IBS symptoms disappeared, energy increased, and Max, who got faster and stronger in the pool. You can have what they have. We look forward to hearing from you soon. And now for a moment of gratitude.
This is the week when our children go back to school, and I'm grateful for their school. It's not that I'm jumping up and down that they're back in school, although I do love that. I'm just very happy that we have a safe school, a great school in our area. They're in French immersion, they're learning, they love their friends, and I'm just very grateful that this is a safe environment that's allowing them to grow.
This is the week that we all go back to school, well, except you. But we all go back to school, and I'm just grateful for the summer, the last few weeks that we had to spend together as a family, you and me and the kids and our extended family that we had some time with. And it's just been really amazing to have the opportunity to do that, and I really had a great time.
Chris Hague, thanks so much for being on the Plant Trainers Podcast today.
Thank you for having me. This is great. We've known each other through the internet for such a long time. It's finally, now that I'm up in Canada, it's finally great to actually put, a face with the name, and now also a voice with the name and a face. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, and you were in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, and we had lunch together, and that was fun. Good times. I think it was National Cheesecake Day.
Yeah, coincidentally, we had one of the best vegan cheesecakes that I've had. So that worked out quite well. It's serendipitous.
And you and I went for a nice run through Toronto, and I appreciate the fact that you slowed yourself down so that I could keep up with you.
Hardly, there is no good runs, there's no bad runs, there's no slow runs. I mean, the purpose of that run was just to catch up. So that gave us more time to catch up, which I liked.
For sure, and it got me around areas of Toronto that I haven't been, so it was a great day.
It was gorgeous down by the water. We'll have to meet up again soon now that I'm up in Ontario for good now, and explore some of the trails here.
We're glad to have you here. Before we get into the meat, before we get into the tofu and potatoes of the podcast, we wanted to know if you had a moment of gratitude to share with our listeners.
I am very thankful for being able to wake up this morning and do the things that I love doing. be that a run, drinking coffee, petting my dog, kissing my wife, and now talking to some two good friends. So that's a lot of moment of gratitude, right? It was wrapped up into one. But today, to quote Ice-T, today is a good day.
And it's so simple and it's great. And people should always take that opportunity to really reflect on those small things that they tend to overlook that they could appreciate every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I did a challenge a couple of months ago, and it was about morning routine and creating a morning routine. It was an hour morning routine, and for me, that's just too long. But while I did it, it was awesome. And one of the things that I learned through it is I always wake up and I touch each finger to my thumb. So I guess I have 8 things that I'm grateful for every morning, and I think about what I'm grateful for, and then that's kind of done, and I move on. But what I learned through this challenge is, as I walk down the stairs, I'm grateful for my legs and my body that's carrying me there. As my cat meows at my feet and wants me to pet him, and I pet him, I'm grateful for him and his fur and how he brings relaxation and responsibility to the family. Well, sometimes relaxation to the family. And, as I pour my hot water, how I'm grateful for the taps that bring us clean water. So finding those little things that we just do and take for granted, I think helps us to become better people. And it's easy to be grateful for those big things, but we need to remember those small things too, like little kisses or petting the cat or the dog or what have you.
And I agree with you. In morning routines in particular, it's when you have that morning routine and you have that mindfulness built into the morning routine, it's like you slip into this extra dimension. And you start to notice it's like a deeper quality of colors and richness of like the world around you. And I'm getting very woo-woo here, but it really is slipping into this deeper connection with things around you, so that you kind of go from this superficial level of gratitude. I'm grateful for my husband, I'm grateful for my wife, I'm grateful, those kind of, I wouldn't say they're superficial, but I would say there's kind of the outer crust of gratitude, and you kind of slip into a deeper understanding of gratitude and a deeper connection with the world around you, which is pretty cool to think about.
And then you're also coming from a place where you don't run out of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's this overflow of what you can be grateful for, because when you're only thinking of those big things, like once you're done the people and the house and the car, it's like, okay, what's next? But when you're used to looking at those small things, you never run out of things to be grateful for. I'm sure that you have also a bigger gratitude for where you are in your life right now, because you've been at some very different stages. And why don't you take us back and tell us a little bit about your story and your youth?
Sure. I guess one of the things I brought up in that gratitude was being able to go for a run and being able to have the body and the health to go for a run, and that's a good place to be in my journey right now, because if you go back in my journey, there's been periods of time where I haven't been able to run. So kind of to start my journey, I guess because I come from a running background, I will start there. I've been running since high school. And I got into running my freshman year of high school. And before that, I had never been a very athletic person. My middle school and high school, we were required to do sports. And in 6th and 7th grade, I was never that great at sports. I was always kind of the person picked last at sports. I was the wallflower that no one wanted on their team. And in 6th and 7th grade, that can be very traumatic. And then in 8th grade, I started to play around with my weight and play around with my athletics, because I figured, if I was able to change that, if I was able to change my weight, if I was able to change how athletic I was, maybe that would help my social identity. Maybe it will, get girls to start liking me, make me more attractive, not be the last one picked on the team, and make me more popular. So I started to play around with becoming more with serious training. Started to get into more active scheduled training, started to hit the weight room. And from there, I started to see results. And I started to, notice that, I was putting on more muscle, I was looking more muscular, I was getting, looks from the girls, I wasn't being chosen last, I started to succeed. And from there, it went into, I'm getting fitter now, what would happen if I started to lose weight? What would happen if I, started to diet more seriously? And in middle school, I was a wrestler. 6th and 7th grade and 8th grade, I was a wrestler. So I had picked up a bunch of tips and tricks from high school wrestlers on how to lose weight quickly. So I started to incorporate those into kind of my own training regimen. And then the day before freshman preseason started, my brother gave me a call and said, my lacrosse coach is making me do cross country. You're going to do cross country too, because if you want to ride home, you better come. So from there, I said to myself, oh, cross country. Well, that would be a perfect way to lose weight. And showed up the first day of preseason cross country my freshman year, ran the time trial with everyone else and got 3rd place and was instantly hooked. And I associated, because I had lost weight, with that fitness. So I started to early on, I started to associate not only people liking me because I was a lower weight and because I was more athletically fit, but also I started to associate being skinnier with being faster. And being with athletic achievement. And once you get that taste of and that association in your mind, it's very hard to break. And that's what drove me, all throughout freshman year of high school. I was automatically associated with skinny equals fast. So I started dieting more seriously, started running more mileage. And because I was seeing faster times in my 5K and better results in races, I kept on doing it. I said, it's obviously because of the weight. It's not because of the more training. I'm able to train more because I'm lighter. And I'm faster because I'm lighter. And that also, I think, coincided with other changes that were going on in my life, especially with, the stress of high school, the social stress of high school, that controlling my food was one thing that I could control. Everything else in my life, whether it was grades or social, I felt was out of my control. So to feel in control, I turned to my food and turned to dieting and turned to athletics, to kind of maybe mask those early signs of depression and isolation and feeling alone. And, that void I filled with running, and filled with exercise nutritional restriction. So that quickly spiraled into a full-on eating disorder. So anorexia nervosa, as well as exercise bulimia. And this went on a good 3, freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year. And my teachers knew what was going on. But whenever they asked, I would always say, I'm dealing with it. I've got everything under control. I'm a little light, but I'm a cross country runner. I need to be light. And my parents also picked up on it pretty quickly and said, let's get you some help. So I met with the therapist once a week, and pretty much I knew how to game the system. I knew how to say knew how to tell what the therapist wanted to hear. So I was treading water, but really not disclosing everything that was going on. And in that way, I was able to keep a low weight and keep on feeding my addiction.
And were they able to tell about the depression and the anxiety as well, or were you actually masking that?
I was actually masking that. That was pretty. I think my therapist was pretty savvy, and I think my parents were pretty savvy as well. That they knew something deeper was going on, but I just never fully disclosed that. I never fully opened up. I didn't feel comfortable enough to open up, and with guys in particular, I think they're afraid of saying, "Oh, I have depression," or "I have anorexia," or "I have bulimia," or "I have issues with my weight and with my body image." Because for guys, it's still quite a stigma. It's still quite a something that we don't have and we shouldn't talk about. And we can get on this later, but especially in sports, it's the least talked about topic. But everyone knows it's going on. You look at professional cyclists on the tour, and you see how skinny they are, and how much they try to manipulate their power to weight ratios. And if you talk to some of their coaches, it's pretty obvious that they're in somewhat caloric restriction, and they're towing the line very, very carefully between they're eating just enough to fuel their performance, but no more to gain weight. So whether it's very much a shadowy topic. So that went on my freshman year, sophomore year, junior year of high school, and then one race in my junior year of high school, one cross country race. I showed up and I just wasn't feeling quite right. I was really, really cold. I was at a pretty low weight, which I was thrilled with at the time, and pretty low weight. Showed up on race day, and I was just cold. I couldn't even after the warm up. I couldn't warm up. So even though it was, I would say, 65, so what is that, 12 degrees Celsius? I had full on thermal tights, full on Under Armour shirt, and a hat and a beanie just to stay warm. Gun goes off, and I knew from the start that this was not going to be my race. Something felt off. I felt tired. I felt lethargic, brain fog. First mile goes by. I'm like, all right, I'll just keep on going. Second mile rolls by. All I had to keep on doing was just, put one foot in front of the other and just kind of push myself to the end, even though I knew something was up. And then by the third mile and the finish line, I had just collapsed. No idea where I was, no idea what was going on. And they took me to the hospital and strapped me up to the machines. And I had minor heart failure. So I had a mini heart attack, which is common if you're at a very low weight for a long time, is that your muscle start to cannibalize your own muscle. And if you get to the point where your heart starts to cannibalize itself because it's a muscle, then you can have serious heart problems because of that low weight. And that's exactly what happened. And I remember sitting in the bed and the doctor turning to me and saying, you have two options. We can hospitalize you right now because there's a ward upstairs, or you can deal with this out of patient, but you're not going to be able to run. And all I could keep on thinking about is, forget the heart attack, forget the metrics on the screen and what they're telling me, forget the low weight. When can I get back to running? When can I do it? What weight do I need to be at? And that's really all I cared about, was when can I get back to running? And from there, so I chose the outpatient route. I fortunately, I never went inpatient, but for me, that was a turning point that I needed to something. I had a serious problem, and I wasn't necessarily so I was kind of, if you think about the 12-step program, I recognized that I had a problem, but whether I was willing to change that problem was a completely different matter, because I still wasn't ready to fully accept that I had an eating disorder, and B, deal with it. All I really cared about was, what numbers do I have to play? What game do I have to play to get back to running? But that was a turning point for me, as far as the facade starting to crumble and starting to deal with this void that I had been trying to shove and push away for 3 years at that time. And so kind of time went on. I eventually started to gain weight, and eventually started to get back to training. But I still wanted to keep a low weight. So I kept on playing with that, that fine line of keeping the low weight, whatever I needed to do just to be able to run enough, but not seriously gain weight or, deal with my health issues or my mental health issues. And then finally, I got a little index card in the mail from Team in Training, which is they raise money for leukemia and lymphoma by doing these great events like training you for a marathon or a triathlon or for a century ride, while you raise money for them. And this Team in Training card, they were advertising for their spring fundraiser. So you could sign up for a triathlon, you could sign up for a marathon, and you could sign up for a century ride. And I showed it to my mom, like, this seems interesting. Can I do it? It seems like a great thing to do before college. So my mom looks at the card, starts laughing, and say, "Chris, you can barely run right now. You're at such a low weight that you're treading the thin red line already. How are you expected to do a full triathlon or a marathon?" I'm like, fine. If I gain 10 pounds, if I get up to 130 pounds, can I do the event? And she's like, fine. You're not doing the marathon because you're too young. You don't have a bike for the century ride, so it looks like you're going to do the triathlon. And I showed up to the first informational session with Team in Training and immediately was hooked. They were talking about the training that they were doing and the multiple, the long hours and the long bricks. And I'm like, this seems like it for me. And that's what really started to motivate me to deal with my weight and deal with my low weight. And that's what got me hooked. I started to make changes. I started to change the way I eat. So I would eat more. I would eat for training because I noticed that I wasn't able to perform well enough in my training sessions if I didn't feel properly. And people were leaving me in the dust if I didn't feel right. And that's what prompted, more changes. So I would eat more so I could fuel the training, and they played off each other. And that's when I started to, with that change and with that progress of, wow, if I fuel myself properly, athletically, I actually can be pretty good. That started to play into the psychological issues of helping me deal with what was going on inside, dealing with the depression, dealing with the control issues, dealing with the perfectionism. And so that's a very long, anyway, triathlon went great. I got up to a healthy weight. And since then, I've been kind of on this upward trajectory. And obviously, once you're an addict, you're always an addict. It's hard to break those neurological connections in your brain of skinny days and fat days and feeling fat and being afraid of food. And that's something that's always in the back of your mind. But for me, it's less of I've turned down the volume on it. And some days there are, the volume's louder than it on other days. But for the most part, I feel like I've evolved into a better place with that and a better place to manage that. So now I'm turning to how can I help, how can I shed light on this pretty serious topic and help other people in the same boat, because it's prevalent in college athletics and youth athletics and in pro athletics. And it's a very common misconception that skinny equals fast, which is not the case.
So as you and everybody else probably knows, I deal a lot with high school student athletes, and through athletics, I watch these students come in grade 9 and they hit the weight room at a very low weight, very skinny kids generally. And they get in there and they want to just get bulked up and get jacked, so they say. And I watch them go through a transformation over the 4 years, but it doesn't really occur to me that, maybe they're not eating right. Maybe they have these eating disorders, or they're going through depression. And are there any signs that you may have exuded that maybe your teacher, your coaches, someone might have been able to pick up on that would be helpful for someone like me to know about?
Yeah, I think for teachers, because I'm also a teacher, so or was a teacher before I went back to grad school. From a teaching perspective and from a coach perspective in youth athletics, I think there's a couple things that stand out. First off, just because a kid's skinny doesn't mean they're going through an eating disorder. But I think some of the key indicators for both males and females is, I think some red flags would be sneaking in secret workouts. So for me, it was, going for a run before practice, going to practice, and then going for a run after practice. So being secretive around food, and then also being secretive about how much you're training. I think that's a key red flag. I think also from a coaching perspective, you're traveling with the team, you see the kids interact. If the kids start to talk about dieting, if the kids start to become obsessed about food and around food, I think that's also an indicator of something else might be going on. So you might hear kids, after practice, or after a race, everyone's eating, the post-race meal, and one kid or two kids aren't eating, and they're like, oh, no, I'm not that hungry. I'm going to have a big dinner tonight. That might be an indicator. It's not saying, oh, this person has an eating disorder, but there might be something more there. Also drastic decreases in weight over the course of a season, and also with that performance. So I think that's another key indicator, which is hard to do for a high school or middle school cross country coach. But if it's visible, there might be a problem. Mm-hmm. And from a psychological perspective, the need for control. it's hard for a coach to pick up on that, but the need for the anxiety, performance anxiety, the need for control, the need the perfectionist mindset, all of that's very much intertwined with eating disorders. So that's something,
And private school in general.
and private school in general.
Yeah.
So that's important to keep in mind.
So how can I set myself up or other people in my position to help prevent this from happening with my athletes? Is there something I can actually do, or is there some psychological issue that the student would already have, or they're predisposed to some kind of condition and it's really out of my control? I can't help them as a coach.
First, let's start with what you shouldn't do, because I think a lot of coaches fall into this mistake. What you shouldn't do is make the link between weight and performance. So a lot of coaches, and I've heard it before, say, well, if you were, 10 pounds lighter, then you'd have raced a PR there. Or, let's focus on losing weight. Especially in middle and high school, you should not be focused on losing weight. I think above all else, if you say, let's focus on your performance and your weight will take care of itself. Let's focus on fueling your training. Let's focus on fueling you correctly so that you can perform the best. And if your weight goes down, then awesome. But let's focus on how we can get you to be the best athlete that you can. I think that's a key thing to do instead of saying, let's focus on weight.
So it's interesting, though, because in here in Ontario, in grade 9 and 10, we're introducing them, giving them a lot more information about Canada's food guide and nutrition and how to eat properly according to Canada's food guide, even though it's not the best guide to be following.
It's changing.
In our opinion. Yes, it is changing, thankfully. But it's a crucial time because they're learning about proper nutrition, so to speak, and they're also getting more into athletics and weight training and running and whatever sport they're into. So it's a little bit of a tough situation because you're wanting them to start to eat well, but they're also going to performance, and now they're trying to make a line or connect the two dots kind of thing.
And I think you can make those two dots by saying, all right, let's do a little experiment. How does this food make you feel? How does this food make you feel in practice? So if a kid has a junk race or a junk performance, kind of delve into that and say, all right, let's figure out what went wrong here. What did you have for lunch before the workout? Did you have 40 chicken McNuggets, or did you have nothing at all, or did you have just a salad? And if you say, if you had nothing at all or just a salad or even 40 chicken McNuggets and you have a junk workout, maybe the two are related. So next workout, let's bounce back from this. Next workout, let's see, let's figure out something that you can have at lunch. Let's figure out something that you can pack at lunch and see how that reflects in your performance. So instead of focusing on calorie restrictions and micromanaging the breakdown of the food, just say, let's see how this makes you feel and let's see how this makes you perform, and turn it into an experiment so that they're able to see, if you fuel yourself properly, then you're able to perform properly. And for guys, you were saying getting in the weight room, getting jacked. I think it's also busting through some of the bro myths and the bro science out there, and saying, you don't need to have 60 grams of protein in a shake before and during and after your weightlifting session. Turn it into an educational experience and say, let's delve into the science here and see what's going on. And let's see what professionals are doing out there beyond what their sponsors are telling them to say, and how that can apply to you as a growing teenager, and make it clear to them also that what they're doing as professionals will differ from you as a high schooler because you have different needs. You have different needs as an athlete.
And they do look up to those pros, and they see like Sidney Crosby drinking his Gatorade nonstop, and they think that, it's the Gatorade, so it must be the Gatorade. I must drink Gatorade. It's exactly that. And they look to those role models, and they see what they're doing, they try to mimic. And these students need to realize, everybody needs to realize that everyone's an individual, everybody's different, they have different needs, different requirements, they're going to have different goals that they're trying to achieve. And just because your role model's doing something one way on camera doesn't mean that they're drinking that chocolate milk all the time, right? So that's really important for everyone to realize.
It's very individual, and then also having high schoolers realize their individual needs. Especially as athletes, that they need something different from what the professionals are getting, because the professionals, if they're in their mid 20s all the way up to 35 and 40s, they have different needs as an athlete because their body has stopped growing, and their growth plates are set, so they don't need to worry about making sure that they're growing for the growth spurt that they're going to, accommodating for the growth spurt that they're going through, their revved up metabolism, their changing hormones. If you base your diet off what those athletes are eating, then you're fueling your body differently than what it requires.
Do you think that asking these athletes to start recording their food, do you think that's putting too much onto them, like doing a food log at a high school athlete situation? Do you think that's too much for them to do? They already have all this schoolwork, they have all these expectations and things they have to take care of, but now as a coach we'd be asking them to actually jot down what they're consuming?
I think it's fine. I think the first step, I think it should be the athletes, if they want to take it seriously. I mean, there's a bunch of high school athletes who just, I just want to show up to practice. I want to run. I want to have a good time, and I don't really care what I eat. That's, I think, a different group than those who want to succeed and those who want to really thrive in the sport. So you have to separate the two groups and say, if you just want to have fun doing cross country, then go for it. Here's the information out there. Here's what you can do to improve. But for those athletes who really do want to succeed, and they're starting to micromanage their meals and micromanage their calories, I don't think that's the best way to go. I think they need to be conscientious of what they're eating. And if recording their food, not down to the gram, but if recording their food so that they're able to see the connections between a good performance and a bad performance and how they performed in a workout, being conscientious of that, I think, is incredibly important and is a skill that needs to be developed in athletes. But as recording the food and, bringing a food scale to school so that you can manage, you can weigh out the sweet potato that you're having at lunch, you can weigh out the peanut butter. I do not think that's healthy especially for high school and middle school athletes.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, but let's say a coach came to you when you were in your situation and you had this eating disorder going on and said, I want you to start logging your food. How would you have reacted to that?
I would have whipped out my food log and said, well, I'm already doing that. You can see how many grams I got. I had 30 grams of total cereal this morning and, 20 grams of banana. So for me, I had that going on and, I was already doing it. But if a coach came to me, if I hadn't been recording and a coach said, let's start recording, that would have fed, I think, my inner problems. I think it would have fed my addictions. Great, one more thing I can record, one more thing I can control. And I think for high school athletes and middle school athletes, recording down to the T is not needed. But I think being conscientious and making, I would say, an overall general food guide. If it doesn't add stress, if it doesn't feed an interior problem, then I think that's fine. If they're using it for, this is how I feel afterwards, this is how I feel during workouts, this is how I feel during the day, this is how I'm focusing in class, and how overall I'm doing and recovering, I think that's fine. I think if they want to record and jot down, make a few notes in their training log saying, this is what I had for breakfast, I think that's fine. When the food scales start to come out, though, that's a red flag right there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same goes for adults as well, whether they're just looking to get fit or get healthy or start eating properly. Food logging is something that I use with some of my clients, and depending on their past history, if they have a past history of eating disorders, sometimes it doesn't work for them, and we don't get into that. But again, I'm asking them to measure out at the beginning, only for some people, because you'll pour a bowl of cereal and you'll think you'll have half a cup of cereal, but really it's 3.5 cups. So for some people, it's necessary just to learn. But my main goal with the food guide is to have extra eyes looking at what you're eating, but also for them to write down in the column how they feel when they're done, how they feel when they begin. And that way they're able to look back and they're able to say wow, this was my best day. These are the kinds of foods that I ate. And it's not about the amounts, right? Especially on a plant-based diet, it's really not about how much you're eating, but to make sure that you're getting in beans, you're getting in greens, and how you feel. But again, that's not a perfect prescription for everybody. It doesn't work for everybody. And a lot of mental health and eating disorders and psychological background plays a big part in it as well.
And I think most people, if you open up a magazine, you'll see, you need to start proportioning out your food if you want to lose weight, because there's that distortion of one serving of cereal for a person trying to lose, that might be, one serving might be too much. It might be a really large bowl. But I think it can go the other way too. If you're recovering from an eating disorder in particular, I think it's helpful to track, to some extent, to track that, because you need to make sure that you're getting in enough. And in the early stages of recovery, I had to track by the gram, because my mind would lie to me and say, oh, that's a serving, when in fact it was 2 tablespoons. So I had to track, not only to keep myself accountable, but keep myself honest. And since then, I've started to get away from that. And since then, because I'm at a healthier point in my recovery and a healthier point just physiologically, I still track, but the purpose of the tracking is different. The purpose of the tracking now is to become a more conscientious eater and a more mindful eater. And I'm not measuring out to the gram. I'm stepping away from that, but I'm able to say, all right, I'm still making sure that I'm eating enough so that I don't fall back or don't relapse. But at the same time, I'm making steps forward and saying, eyeballing measurements and saying, this is all right. And if it goes over, it goes over. If it's under, it will all balance out. So for people in recovery, if you are just starting out, it might be helpful to measure, but also while at the same time dealing with the emotions so that you're not stressing out about every single little gram.
Of course. And it does help to take breaks from that tracking as well, right? Like do it for a week, do it for 2 weeks, take a break. And then as your diet changes, go back to it so that you could start to. It's easier to eyeball once you've measured a bit too. So I'm interested the way that you're talking now. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the rock bottom when you had the heart attack, and 10 being eating disorder is just not something that comes into your mind on a daily basis. Do you mind answering? Where do you think you are on that scale now?
I would say it bounces between a 7 and a 9. Just depending on the day and depending on, so many different factors. But yeah, it bounces between 7 and 9. And I think that's the 9s are where I really focus on my personal health care. So making sure that my self-care, so making sure I'm meditating, making sure I'm getting in those moments of gratitude, making sure that I'm stepping away from the metrics, and listening to my body. For good, or listening to what emotions are going on, because I think throughout my recovery, and it's always been a struggle of listening to my body. And in high school, I denied what my body was telling me. I was denying, I'm hungry right now, I need to eat. I told it to shut up and just get on with the workout. I told it to shut up and say, let's hit the books. We need to focus. We need to get the A's. We need to get into college. We need to do all these things. So, just kind of gagging it and just putting all of those emotions away so I didn't have to deal with them. And then exercising and taking caffeine and all that to deaden what my body was saying and telling me so that I didn't have to feel those. So I think part of my self-care now is embracing those emotions as they come up, being mindful of those emotions, and realizing, these aren't something that I should be ashamed of dealing with and talking about and embracing. They're there. So let's be mindful and experience them. That doesn't mean that I have to like what's going on, but at the same time, being mindful that they're there and not trying to push them away or neglect them.
So in being mindful of those things and listening to your body, as an athlete, how do you get there? How do you teach yourself to do those kind of things? Do you use your training to do that? Do you go to a professional to help you with that? How did you get there as an athlete in learning how to properly, or not properly, but it's a process, it's ongoing, but how did you learn to listen to your body so well?
I think it started out both during training and then also doing the little stuff around training. So I started meditating back when I started to recover. I started meditating and exploring kind of Buddhist psychology and Buddhist thoughts and kind of Eastern mindfulness practices. And so I started doing sitting meditation, and then I started to get into incorporating that into my athletics. and saying, and taking that mindfulness to my runs, to my bike workouts, to my swims, and then also letting the two play off each other. So as an athlete, taking a moment at the beginning of my run to give thanks of what's going on. And then also in the middle of the run, turn off the Garmin or silence the Garmin, silence the phone, and just focus on my breathing, focus on what's going on. And that can be done. That doesn't have to be an easy run. That doesn't have to be an easy workout. You can do that during sprints. And say, what is my body feeling right now? Well, my body's, screaming out, this is tough. And then turning that into my body screaming out, this is tough. That's okay. Let's push a little bit more. You're going to be okay. You can push a little bit further. The pain that you're suffering right now, it's there, but you don't have to neglect it. Embrace it and use it as, let's see where this goes. Let's see how this evolves over the course of the next interval, or even in a race. You're at mile 10 of a half marathon. You're in pain. You have that choice of, I could slow down. I could keep on going, pushing through this. Well, figure out what's going on in your body right now and kind of make peace with it and say, I'm suffering right now, but I'm going to be okay. And this is what I'm experiencing right now. And this is actually a pretty cool thing right now that I'm going through. I think everyone on this course is suffering. Let's explore this more deeply. Let's see where this can lead. Let's see what psychological mindset this might lead to.
I think that's beautiful. And it's not just, that doesn't just go for athletics. I think that's something that anybody could use in any challenge they face in any aspect of their life. Just embrace that moment of struggle and let yourself know that it's okay, you're going through that, and then just push yourself and see how much further you can take it. I think that's a great thing to do.
And if you practice it enough, you can see similarities. And you can see similarities between workouts of when you start to feel a certain way. And you can say, at 45 seconds into a 90-second sprint, that's when I start to fade. Let's see what I can do differently in this next one to kind of push through that and kind of deal with this more. Or, I start to, and you can apply this beyond athletics too. You can say, I really start to get anxiety when I talk to my mom or talk to my dad, or I really start to feel anxiety when this comes up, or I get an email from this person.
Or writer's block, or creating art, or putting out a new program for helping people to coach. I feel it in a lot of different places. Yeah.
So you can see those similarities in those occurrences, and then you can see how you react to those occurrences. So if you're during a run, you could say, I slow down at 45 seconds because it starts to hurt. Well, what can you do to push through at that 45 seconds? When that thought comes up, how can you interact with it differently? Or in life, if you feel that stress and anxiety of, I've got a deadline tomorrow, I'm going to not eat dinner because I feel so anxious about that deadline that comes up tomorrow, or B, I'm going to, grab the potato chips because I don't want to deal with that deadline tomorrow. Dealing with those emotions and kind of feeling those emotions and letting those emotions ride the roller coaster up and down before making a decision of what to do, embracing those and being mindful of those, that's I think shows it's a good way of, actually, how should I phrase this? Being mindful and being aware of those emotions and allowing those emotions just to be and fluctuate. That, I think, takes a lot of maturity as an athlete and as a person, and takes practice, but it's a great tool so that you don't fall prey to addictive behavior, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And it's unbelievably important advice. And if people don't really see you right now like we do, they hear your voice only, but if they only knew how young you were and how mature you are for your age, you're in your 20s, which is unbelievable. You've gone through a ton of stuff and you've learned so much, and you're sharing such important information. And we really appreciate you sharing your story with us, because I know that's going to definitely help some of the student athletes that I have that will listen to this show, or other athletes that are still in high school, in college, their parents, their coaches, their trainers. There's so much value in this information, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share with us today. If someone wanted to reach out and connect with you, what would be the best place for them to go do that?
Well, first off, thank you very much for having this platform. I think I'm very thrilled that I'm able to share my story and hopefully be able to help someone out there who's listening. But they can go to my website, braveheartcanada.com. That's my coaching page. My wife and I have a coaching platform called braveheartcanada.com. So you can go there. You can reach out through the contact page. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at Tribuddha. That's TRIBUDDHA, Tribuddha. So those are the best places. I'm very active on social media, very active on my website, try to post a lot there, both psychological resources about eating and nutrition, about performance and training and taking your training to the next level. So those platforms are the best to reach me.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. Again, we thank you for your time. We look forward to meeting your beautiful, lovely wife one day as well and hearing from her in the future. And you're just 2 hours away, so we hope to see you soon. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. This has been great.
We'll link to all of your social media and your website in our show notes. So if people want to check you out, they'll be able to click on that at planttrainers.com. Thanks again, Chris, and we'll see you shortly.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any other podcast listening platforms. We appreciate the feedback we receive from you. Every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans, it ensures other people will find us too. Thanks to our patrons. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference. Connect and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Plant Trainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at www.planttrainers.com for awesome plant-based recipes and a list of our services. Email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so we can answer them on our upcoming Facebook Lives. We hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time, and have a healthy day.